On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we embrace a kind of certainty. Our ancient tradition describes the cosmic drama that we have all become quite familiar with over the last few weeks. There is judgment, there is mercy, there are the books of life and death, and there is a structure to the universe. And more than that, there is agency. We, finite human beings, are once again capable of interacting with the great cosmic forces through the acts of tshuva, tzedakah, tefillah. Through repentance, charity, and prayer, you can influence your fate. And then, a few days later, we throw that all away, and we go out into the wild, quite literally, to construct a sukkah and expose ourselves to the whims of the natural world, the changing season. We sit beneath an unfinished roof, surrounded by shaking walls, and we marvel at the sheltering power of a small structure, until we run into a power even greater. Whether that power is the lashing rain or the thundering winds, or what I'm told is the specific bane of Toronto Sukkot, the raccoon. I was told a local rabbi finally, after years, has given up on sleeping in his sukkah, not because that it ever gets too cold, he has more than enough blankets and jackets for that, but because the patter of tiny raccoon feet sneaking in and around him all night stops him from ever getting a proper rest. And while I'm afraid there is no ritual to ward off raccoons, some kind of ancient anti-ushpizin to discourage undesired visitors, our sages did have a lot to say about rain and winds that fall out of season, unexpected, undesired turns of events, those shaking up of grand plans. They understood that fundamentally Sukkot is about living at the edge of uncertainty. It is an especially uncertain time right now, this beginning of 5783. Powers beyond us continue to shake the world. War continues between Russia and Ukraine, and the specter of nuclear weapons, which were thought/prayed banished to the ashes of the Cold War, seem to tug at the edge of our collective conscience. Clickbait headlines assail me every time I open my internet browser. These are the top US cities vulnerable to a nuclear strike. Congresswoman AOC condemned for voting for nuclear war. Russian willingness for nuclear combat almost assured. Misinformation, disinformation, and more. Who can tell what is true and what is simply generated by an algorithm in an attempt to generate more clicks? One of my great teachers, the Rabbi Daniel Landis, compiled a text in the early 1990s called Confronting Omnicide, Jewish Reflections on Weapons of Mass Destruction. It's been 30 years, and his now book, the question arises, is it an evergreen text, or is it a relic of paths not taken? Uncertainty. I don't think I've ever mentioned Kanye West in a sermon before, but there's a first time for everything. The historically troubled rapper was deplatformed from Instagram and Twitter this week for going on a rant that embraced the vast majority of negative Jewish stereotypes and anti-Semitic tropes, mixed with just a little bit of Black Hebrew Israelite-inspired teaching on how stolen identities and how he cannot himself possibly be anti-Semitic because he, a man who proudly runs a church Sunday service for the wealthiest, most influential entertainment professionals in California, is actually the real Jew. West, whose notable mental health struggles make criticizing his statements a more nuanced task than dealing with the average bigot, is no stranger to controversy and likes to claim that his intolerant and abusive behaviors are brave truth-telling, a claim that legions of supporters, politicians, and pundits cheer on. And here is the uncertainty again. Is this a sick man continuing his very public breakdown in the digital public square? Or is this more proof that it has become acceptable to openly indulge in hatred of our people once again? Even in victory, we find uncertainty. American diplomats this week brokered a maritime border and gas deal between Lebanon and Israel, which is at first glance more of this normalization between the Arab world and the Jewish state, a warming trend decades in the making, especially with Lebanon, often viewed as Iran's most direct proxy, and a nation which has never before ever recognized any border with the Jewish state. But opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu has already come out and said he has massive disdain for the deal. It is a surrender to Hezbollah, and he will not enforce it should he win power in these November 1st elections. Is this politics as usual? The breakdown that we've seen all over the world where left and right cannot acknowledge any successes that the other one brings to the table? Or is it the honest perspective of a statesman with the years and years of high-level knowledge and diplomatic insight? Uncertainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. Fascists take power in Italy. There is an ongoing resistance in Iran. There are vicious elections in the United States. And here in Canada, we have reckoning and review as the Emergencies Act attempts to determine what really happened. What should the fate be of those who participated in and were subject to the truck convoy in Ottawa earlier this year? Uncertainty, uncertainty. I have no doubt that each of you could add a new uncertainty to this litany of worry. And what can be done about it? Is there anything that can even ever be done when it comes to warmongering, to Jew hatred, to political disputes? 3 weeks ago, there was order in the universe. We had the book of life, and the king was in the field, and the year was yours to shape through your goodness and your willingness to actualize redemption. And today, our fragile shelters shake in a tempest. Uncertain is the future. What power do we possess to withstand the oncoming storm? The ancient rabbis of the Mishnah too felt this tension, this question, and they too existed in two worlds at once. One where they could delve into the greatest mysteries of the world, understanding that the study of Torah was itself an act of partnering with God. And they existed as subjects and victims of the mighty Roman Empire. An empire whose power eclipsed any and all foes, who could decree and determine sweeping policy that would upend the lives of untold nations. And they asked, do we have the power to change the world? Or is there a greater plan that moves us? What is the order of the universe? And they answered, Hakol tzafui v'harshut netuna uvtov ha'olam nadin. Everything is foreseen, but freedom has been granted, and all is judged with goodness. Everything is foreseen, but freedom has been granted, and all is judged with goodness. Rabbi Shmuley Yankowitz of Valley Midrash writes in this passage, the knowledge that we are free, while also realizing that God knows what we will choose, should inspire humility. And this sense of humility doesn't have to be paralyzing, nor should it impede us on our spiritual journeys. Rather, it is an empowering humility, a humility which should inspire courage. Our freedom is a gift to be actualized. In this Mishnah, right after we are reminded that we are free, we are also told that God will judge us compassionately. For God will be gentle with us because we will strive our best to do something good with our freedom. Rav Shmuley manages to capture the essence of this great human anxiety with delicacy and pointed understanding. Uncertainty about the world can be paralyzing. The feeling of powerlessness can be demoralizing. But the gift of free will is also the freedom to make a difference. And even if those actions do not actively seem to affect the greater structure of the world, it should still inspire us to act with humility and courage, because the freedom to make grand choices in the face of grand uncertainty is a gift. Somehow, all of it is true. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that grand cosmic drama, the power to make choices in this world, it is true. And Sukkot and the storm and the powerlessness of it all being foreseen, it is bigger and it is grander than us. It is true. And 2,000 years ago, in the face of the greatest empire the world had ever seen, the rabbis understood. You have the freedom to make all the difference in the world. And there are powers that have been put into place beyond you. And you must embrace the courage and humility to recognize it and do something anyways. The world is filled with goodness, and the world will be judged with goodness. And this is the vital wisdom of the Mishnah, that ultimately it will be okay. Acknowledgement of cosmic uncertainty is a challenge. It has been a challenge for human beings since the very first human being took its very first steps. And the solution for us as a Jewish people has always been this: optimism and audacious faith. We must believe that in the middle of the storm, there is something that will guide us to a better outcome. And we call that guide many things. Some of us call it Torah, and others call it God. Some call it Jewish community, and others the great chain of generations. Whatever we call it, it is this grand thing that we have inherited. It is a grand thing that we are part of, and it keeps us going, and keeps us relevant, and keeps us thriving. Because Judaism is a religion, despite our often self-deprecating sense of humor, an audacious religion of optimism and faith. A relationship with covenant requires a belief that the other side will be upheld, even when the world we see is quite different. It requires optimism to march into the wilderness or to dive into a splitting sea. It requires optimism to say, Ani ma'amin, I believe with perfect faith that although the day may be quite far off, that God will fulfill the promise given to my ancestors. And so I ask, is it really so audacious to hold on to this belief that things can and will work out, that things can and will be okay, because the world is judged for goodness, when that has been our truth for the better part of 3,000 years? Yes, these are uncertain times, but we have been through uncertain times before. And we have continued to act with the freedom that we have been given, and the world has moved forward, and the world is judged with goodness. And so, I remind you of this as we say goodbye to our Sukkot in the coming days. A Sukkah and the uncertainty that it represents is only a bad place to be when you're going to be stuck there indefinitely. It only fills us with dread when it is the only option in the universe. But Jews in Judaism do not live in the wilderness forever. We don't live in a sukkah forever. And as we enter into Simchat Torah, we need to remember that on the other side of the sukkah is a promised land waiting for us to arrive. The world is filled with goodness. Moadim l'simcha, Shabbat Shalom.